Hello and welcome to the latest Manchester is Red podcast. I'm your host today, Manchester Evening News Sports editor Sean McCormack, and I'm joined by Manchester United club writer George Smith, fresh from a nice little bit of annual leave. How are you feeling today, George? Glad to be back?
Yeah, no, not bad at all. Thank you, Sean. Not bad at all. Glad to be back, but unfortunately, not a lot developed while I was off, so there's not been too much to get my teeth into, unfortunately. But no, good to get back into the swing of things and looking forward to chatting to you for the next half an hour or so.
Yeah, good to have you back, and we'll get into the transfers or lack of at Manchester United. Just before we make a start on the episode, before we dive in, we'll of course offer a shout out to our sponsor Saily, which is a brand owned by NordVPN. That is a new eSIM service app that you can use abroad if you're in desperate need of an internet connection. You can download Saily in your app store and use code Manchester at checkout to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. For more information, please go to our description box. Well, George, the natural place to start is that United's players have started to drip feed back into pre-season training. We saw yesterday a few of the players arriving back into Carrington, also including new signings, Diego Leon and Matias Cunha. What is the plan, I guess, for this week? Is it a case of just sort of getting back into the swing of things? Obviously, this is a big pre-season for Ruben Amorim. His first pre-season as United boss, his first full season as United manager. What's the sort of plan for the next week or so?
Well, as we found out yesterday, 15 players came back for the start of pre-season yesterday. As you said there, Sean, Diego Leon and Matias Cunha, two of those 15 through the door, and arguably the headline news of the returnees. The first couple of days will sort of be spent doing gym work, fitness and conditioning testing, which is the norm for any football club at any level when pre-season kicks off. So wouldn't expect to see any visual evidence of the players being out on the grass until later in the week, certainly doing some ball work or whatever else. 15 players, as I say, came back yesterday, and there will be more starting to drip their way back through the door come Thursday. Those who were on international duty at the end of last season, sort of the Nations League June internationals, the World Cup qualifiers, they will be back on Thursday. So the likes of Casemiro, Rasmus Højlund, they'll be among those, Manuel Ugarte as well. So there'll be a few big names still to come back, and it'll give Ruben Amorim a larger pool of players to work with sort of towards the end of this week. Bruno Fernandes, Diogo Dalot, of course, they've been granted some additional leave due to the tragic death of Diogo Jota last week. So they're not expected back until next Monday, I believe, but they would have been back Thursday had that not happened. So it's only really a couple of days they're getting extra off, so it shouldn't impact their pre-season too much. And then obviously we've got the five that emerged last week that are planning to leave Old Trafford: Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho, Jadon Sancho, Antony and Malacia. They weren't present at Carrington on Monday. Informed the club they want to leave this summer. The club have, obviously, as we've reported throughout the summer, Marcus Rashford, Garnacho and Sancho Antony and Sancho are three priority sales for United. Garnacho told he can leave at the right price. And Malacia, of course, he's surplus to requirements. He spent the second half of last season out on loan. There's no future for him. He doesn't suit Ruben Amorim's system. So those five were nowhere to be seen on Monday. They've had their return dates deferred until later in July, provided they've not sourced a move elsewhere until then. So probably from next Monday onwards, Ruben Amorim will have the bulk of the players he wants to work with next season back available, and they'll be gearing up for that trip to Sweden to face Leeds United in their pre-season opener. And then in a couple of weeks' time, it'll be off to the US for the official pre-season tour. So it'll be a gradual start to pre-season. Things won't start moving too quickly just yet. Be gym work for a couple of days. But probably by this time next week, next Tuesday, we'll really start to see things ramping up ahead of the big kickoff.
Yeah, and of course we'll probably also see sort of the youngsters that might be involved in that pre-season friendly. Obviously, that's sort of been a tradition where, as United players sort of get back in the swing of things, there will be a few more of the youngsters given an opportunity in that game as well. So obviously we'll sort of keep an eye on that and keep some tabs on that on the Manchester Evening News website. As you touched on there, George, the big story towards the end of last week was the five players who have asked to leave United. No real great surprises with any of them. As we said, we've reported that certainly in the case of Rashford, Sancho and Antony, they spent last season on loan elsewhere, and they're expected to find permanent homes away from United this summer. Garnacho can leave at the right place, and as you said, Malacia has surplus to requirements. United have given them this sort of timeline of mid to late July for their return back to the training ground. It's easier said than done, though, isn't it? It's as we've seen in these transfer windows in the past, these sort of sagas can drag on and drag on. United will want it to drag on, of course. But how realistic is it for 1, 2, 3, 4, even all 5 of those players to have found new moves by then. History suggests that at least a few of them are still going to be United players by the time that sort of deadline passes.
And how many times in the past, Sean, have we seen, not just at Manchester United, all clubs, how many deals get done so late in the window where obviously prices drop just purely out of the desperate need to shift players on? And I don't think this is going to be resolved particularly quickly. It's been apparent since the opening day of the transfer window, the 1st of June, that Marcus Rashford, Antony, Jadon Sancho have been priority sales. Garnacho long since told he can go, but nobody, to our knowledge, has stepped forward yet with a concrete offer that United are willing to accept. And it is a far easier said than done, the world of transfers, whether it's incomings or outgoings. It's not a case of saying, I want that player, here's the money, job done, we'll take him off your hands. You've got to factor in agent fees, bonuses, sell-on clauses, you name it. There's so many factors that go into getting a transfer done. So I don't think it's going to be a quick fix to getting all these players out the door. United would love it to be, because they need funds to bring in new signings. They are essentially relying on shifting these players to bring in new faces. So they'll be keen to get it done sooner rather than later. But in the case of Marcus Rashford, for example, his wages are such a sticking point. He wants Champions League football. He's refusing to take a wage cut on what he's currently on, which is around £325,000 per week. There's not many clubs in the world of football that are going to be able to subscribe to that and offer him that. So you're probably limiting him to the likes of PSG, Barcelona, who Barcelona, as we know, have been linked with him very heavily, and United expect him to go abroad. So that's going to be a tough one to solve. Garnacho, you're looking at probably 50, 60 million pounds to try and sort of realistically make a deal viable to sell him. Antony, we know Real Betis want him. Again, wages a potential sticking point. Malacia would probably be the easiest one to get done, because you're looking at a relatively cheap fee. I think United need only just over 3.2 million to avoid a loss under the PSR regulation. So if there's any club out there that is in need of a left back and are willing to take a punt on Antony Malacia, it could be a fairly risk-free move. But he didn't pull up any trees really at PSV Eindhoven in that loan spell, so he's not particularly created a market for himself. And then obviously Jadon Sancho, wages again are a problem for him. Juventus heavily linked with him. But similarly to Rashford, there are only a select number of clubs that are going to be able to afford those demands. And obviously, if it's a permanent transfer, United are going to want a big fee for him as well, so around 20, 25 million pounds. So United have got their work cut out to get players out the door. And there is a sense of frustration growing on social media. And it's understandable. As football fans, we're all guilty of it. We live for transfers in the summer. It's what makes the world go round at this time of the year. But you've got to accept that it is not so easy when you're dealing with players on such enormous, astronomical wages, which doesn't make the task very easy. So I don't think it's going to be a situation that's resolved very quickly in the case of all 5 of them. But ideally, you'd like it to be, because United need these players off the books to essentially free up funds and space to get new players through the door to beef up Ruben Amorim's squad.
I guess, do you think it is a good thing, I guess, that United have been so decisive and so public with the fact that, these 5 players don't want to be here. We don't particularly want them as part of our squad as well. So this information is being made public. They're not going to come back anytime soon. But if the situation does drag on, say if it gets to August and none of those players are being sold on, and then it gets towards the end of the transfer window and they're still haven't been sold on, is it kind of like an issue, the fact that they're still hanging around the training ground? Is it an issue that if they don't sell them, will they be able to reintegrate them back into the squad? What do you think about that situation? Because I know it's a long time in the transfer window, but as you say, these deals are difficult to do. Do United need to be creative, or is there a chance that they do get reintegrated back in the squad at some point?
Good question. Complex one as well. There's no right or wrong answer, I suppose. It is a difficult one, because I suppose in the case of Rashford, Garnacho, Sancho, Antony, all as natural wingers, they don't fit into Ruben Amorim's system of the 3-4-2-1. And we all know they've already signed Matias Cunha. They want Bryan Mbeumo as well. That's still rumbling on in the background. So they essentially want 2 players who are comfortably capable of playing a more central position, which obviously those 4 wingers aren't so. Rashford, to a degree, can play as a striker, but he's made it clear that it's not his preferred position. He doesn't like playing there. So it is going to be a difficult one if you get to a point where you are really, really struggling to offload them and you're potentially going to be stuck with them. So that situation, to see how Ruben Amorim deals with that, how he handles it, would be very, very interesting to see. But I suppose United have got to try and weigh up what's the difference between potentially keeping players who are unhappy at the football club, who are not wanted by the head coach, against maybe if we lower the price by, I don't know, 5 million off each player or whatever, do we just take that risk to ensure we get something that we can then put towards bringing players in that do fit the system? So I think that'll be a really difficult one. And if you get to a point, say mid-August, when the Premier League season starts, with sort of 2.5, 3 weeks to go until the window shuts, and you've still got those 5 players on the books, it's going to be really interesting to see how United resolve that situation. But as you said, the window, it's long, twists and turns happen every day. Things can happen at speed, particularly as we get towards that end point in the window. But at the minute, I think there is no obvious solution to these 5 players being offloaded at this point. So it's obvious. Obviously, United have not offloaded anybody so far. There's some of the exception of those who were released at the end of their contracts. They've not overseen a permanent sale yet, not overseen a loan move yet. So things have moved slowly, and it surprised me a little bit because they got Cunha done on the opening day of the window. Well, they reached the agreement and then finally formalised the transfer a couple of weeks later, and you sort of sense that they mean business this summer. They're going to try and move at speed. But if you've got no suitors coming forward for your players, what do? They can't control that, unfortunately. So there is going to be a sense of frustration. It's creeping through already on social media, but the window's still relatively young. There's still 5 or 6 weeks till the season starts, but they've got to try and improve their hit rate in the sellers market sooner rather than later.
Just touching on the sort of the point you made there, moving away from the selling story and trying to be a bit more positive, talking about players who could come into United this summer. You touched on the Bryan Mbeumo deal still sort of rumbling on in the background. The difference between that deal and the Cunha deal, I guess, is that there was a clear release clause in the Cunha deal, and United just activated that, didn't mess around, got him through the door. But is there a point, I guess, where United can't afford to lose too much more time? This has been rumbling on now for weeks. We know that he's United's top target to coming alongside Cunha. We know Mbeumo wants to move to Old Trafford, but there is that sort of difference in the price after the first 2 bids. How important is it United get the 3rd bid right? Because, you know, they're only going for 4th bids, 5th bids, especially this sort of already they've got this preconception that they've overpaid for players in the past. How important is it get that 3rd bid right? But also, how important is it that they do it swiftly and there's a resolution either way, so United can either move on or get that deal done very quickly?
Yeah, I think they've got to tread a very fine line with this one and strike the balance between the financial side and the sporting side. Because, as you've said there, Sean, this club has been ridiculed for many years for paying over the odds for players. And it's felt like this summer they are in the process of changing that in terms of going for proven Premier League talent who they hope will come in and hit the ground running. Me and you, we've had discussions about Mbeumo many a time in the past few months, saying what a great player he is. And I'd be really excited if United were to get this over the line. I think he's a fantastic player. I've rated him for many years, 20 Premier League goals last season. And we reported a couple of weeks ago that the deal was very, very close to getting done. Brentford then moved the goalposts again, which has meant that the deal's been delayed. And at that point, it felt like it was just a matter of time before it got done. So United are now having to weigh up the 2 scenarios where they either sort of commit another bid, which maybe he's getting towards the point of paying a little bit over the odds. But then they've also got to look at it and think, we need proven Premier League players. We need somebody who's going to provide goals. And Mbeumo will offer them that. So it is a difficult one for them to weigh up, but the clock is ticking ultimately. And I know we've just said a few minutes ago that the window is still relatively young and there is a long way to go, but time is still passing by. The pre-season tour begins in 2.5 weeks. Ruben Amorim, in an ideal world, would have liked to have the bulk of his business done for that, but we all know that is rarely the case. But I think the thing where United fans are going to start to get frustrated is when they look at the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester City, Arsenal now. They're pressing ahead with their business. Liverpool moved very swiftly to sign the likes of Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong. City got 4 deals done really, really quickly at the beginning of the window. Chelsea have added João Pedro recently. Arsenal, Kepa and Martin Zubimendi in the past week, now pressing ahead with a deal for Victor Gyökeres. So United are going to look at those 4, the fans are going to look at those 4 clubs and go, hang on a minute, we're in a far worse position than those 4 heading into the new season. We're the ones desperate to climb the table. We need fresh blood. And here we are on the 8th of July with only 2 new signings through the door, one of which may not even be a first-team player for next season. We don't know yet with Diego Leon. But I think it is a difficult balancing act because you've got to strike the right balance between not paying over the odds, but also needing a player of Mbeumo's quality, which we know he is. So I think United have got to stick with it for now. I think if you've got a top target in mind, which they clearly have, he wants the move, which is key. And as you said, Sean, the Cunha deal was made very easy to do because of that release clause. And Mbeumo hasn't got one of those, unfortunately. So that's made it harder. Brentford standing firm, which they're entitled to do. He is their star asset. They've already lost their manager this summer, so they will want to try and retain as much as that core nucleus of the squad as they can. But I think with the way this has rumbled on for so long and Mbeumo is so keen to get it over the line, I think it will happen eventually. I just think it's maybe going to take another 2-3 weeks. Who knows? How long's a piece of string? You don't know. So we'll see what happens. But I think it will get done eventually. But it's just a question of how much longer can they allow United? How much longer can United wait to get it over the line? That's the question.
And I guess it's not just the sort of the waiting to get that deal over the line, George. It kind of then overspills into how it affects United's other transfer priorities. Now, obviously, we've reported that signing a new striker is a major priority this summer. It's pretty obvious United didn't score enough goals last season. Obviously, signing Cunha, who scored 17 goals last season, signing Mbeumo, who scored 20 goals last season, will help in that regard. But they do want a proven goal scorer through the door. Obviously, Liam Delap was a big target. He went to Chelsea. Champions League football there kind of swayed that decision. It's fair enough, but they'll also be linked with the likes of Victor Gyökeres. They've been linked with Victor Osimhen. They've been linked with Hugo Ekitike. They've been linked with Ollie Watkins. Obviously, it looks like, Gyökeres is going to go to Arsenal, so that's kind of one to scratch off the list. But is it affecting that search? And is that why sort of we've seen reports today that there's free agents being offered at United, the likes of Callum Wilson, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Jamie Vardy? The longer that search sort of rumbles on, I guess the more that those kind of bargain signings start to come into play rather than the big name hitters, because until United get sales through the door and until United get Mbeumo through the door, they can't really kind of throw the money they would like to at that striker signing.
No, that is the problem. And I mean, like you said there, Sean, Cunha, he adds goals to that team, he adds creativity to that team, and Mbeumo will do likewise if they get that done. But neither of them are that natural number 9 that they're crying out for. So, of course, Mbeumo, if he is to sign Cunha, they'd certainly supplement the lack of a natural goal-scoring signing so far. But it is an obvious need. We know United need it. Rasmus Højlund was nowhere near good enough last season. Joshua Zirkzee isn't a natural striker. They can't afford to end the season without signing an established goal-scorer. Gyökeres, Osimhen, Jonathan David, to some degree, they were the 3 that sort of felt the most attainable within the category of being elite level strikers this summer. Liam Delap, like Cunha, he would have been an easy deal to get done with that release clause he had, but I think it would have represented another massive gamble going for him. Very young, relatively raw, still did well at Ipswich last season, 12 goals, was a pretty respectable return in a team that was relegated, but United needs somebody more established, more proven for the level they want to try and get back to. So I don't necessarily count Liam Delap as a massive blow that they've missed out on. It certainly delayed things. There's no doubt about that. It has pushed things further back, but I don't necessarily think it would have been the wisest of moves. But they've got to go for somebody eventually. They're going to have to force their hand at some point. But the question is, who do they go for? You've mentioned the 3 free agents there. And just before we started recording this podcast, I'm writing a piece about it at the minute. And like I've outlined, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, with respect, he's only had 2 really good seasons in the Premier League, only reaching double figures twice. Jamie Vardy's 39 in January. Callum Wilson has had a lot of injury issues, and his best days, you would imagine, are behind him now. All been great players in their own right, but are they Manchester United standard? Probably not. Certainly not to be leading Manchester United attackers there, number 9. And maybe you'd even question their suitability to be the backup striker, perhaps. So it's certainly not the wisest of scenarios, and it goes without saying that these 3 players, they've been offered to United. United have not expressed interest in them. It's just a case of agents touting. They've got their colleagues. They want to put them in the shop window. They're going to want to get interest ramping up for them. But it's not an ideal fix, is it? Let's be honest. Going for one of those 3, it wouldn't be the solution United or Ruben Amorim would want. So it's really going to be interesting to see where this striker search goes. But one way or another, they're going to have to solve it. But something tells me it's going to be a while before this particular case is cracked. So I think this one could rumble on for a while longer. It's not an ideal situation. But on the plus side, if they get Mbeumo done eventually, him and Cunha, they should supplement the loss of a number 9 for now. But there's certainly no excuse for ending the summer without a number 9. But it goes back to that point about sales being crucial. Unless you start to oversee those and sort of the high-end sales, the likes of the Rashfords, your Garnachos, you are going to be struggling to pluck the elite level number 9 that you want. But who that could turn out to be is anybody's guess at the minute.
And just sort of moving away from that, then obviously sales are sort of struggling to rumble along at the minute. The search for the new forwards being affected by that. But one way they can bring in some money is from players that they've sold in the past who then have sell-on clauses. Now, one particular case is pretty topical at the moment. Antony Malacia looks like he's going to sign for Newcastle United from Nottingham Forest. A fee of around £55 million for him. Obviously, Malacia left United 2 years ago. The figure being banded about is 15%. That hasn't been confirmed by United yet. We are doing some digging on that. But either way, United are guaranteed some sort of transfer windfall from that, probably around the £5-6 million mark. Now, it's not groundbreaking money, but that's money that can help the kitty, certainly. Certainly helps with their PSR accounting for the year ahead. But sort of touching on a more wider point, it's probably a point that we've laboured on this podcast quite a bit, because it's not the first example of a player who's left United who's then on to have some success elsewhere. Scott McTominay is a major example this season in Napoli. But Alanga's really went from strength to strength, not the Forest, particularly this season. His numbers and the goals and assists column are very good. Obviously, he's now looks like he's going to get a move to a Champions League club in Newcastle United. Is it right to think that United are wrong to let these players go, or is it sort of a bit of perspective needed and looking back to the time and how many fans were truly losing sleep, losing the player of Alanga's quality at the time?
I think in football, and as football fans, we're all guilty of it, aren't we? When a player leaves our club and they go on to do well, you automatically say, we shouldn't let him go. Why have we done that? But if it doesn't work out at their next club, nobody batters an eyelid. It's just part and parcel of football. It's part and parcel of life, in the sense that nobody knows what is going to happen. But at the time when Alanga was sold, it was a sensible move from a financial viewpoint. Let's be honest, he'd not really kicked on after making that breakthrough season at United. And it did make sense to sell him to Nottingham Forest. And luckily for him, it's worked out well in his career. He's developed his career there, did really well at Forest, had a great season last season. And it's now earned him, or certainly looking like it's going to earn him, a big move to Newcastle United. As you've said there, Sean, Champions League football on offer for him. He's played in that competition in the past for United, albeit a handful of appearances. But he did score in that competition against Atletico Madrid under Ralph Rangnick. I remember that well. But I think, as a wider point, like you say, does it sort of make United fans think we shouldn't have let X, Y, and Z players go if they've gone on to do well? I don't think you can look at it like that, because at the point when they were sold, it made sense from a financial viewpoint. And I think, obviously, one that's been the most topical in the last 12 months has been Scott McTominay, with how well he's done at Napoli in his first season there, helping them win the Serie A title. Last summer, a lot of United fans were mindful of the fact he was entering the last year of his contract. He just had a 10-goal season in 23-24. His stock was at an all-time high. And it made sense from a financial viewpoint to cash in. They got about £25 million for him. Yes, he did offer goals from midfield, then box crashing runs which weren't replaced. But Scott McTominay, when we were looking at the situation this time last year when United were trying to sign Ugarte, they needed to strengthen the midfield, you questioned, he's not going to play every week. So why would we keep a player who's in the final year of his contract, who we could sell for 25 million, who might get the odd appearance here and there from the bench next season? But of course, he goes to Napoli, does what he does, and everybody's like, oh, we shouldn't have sold him, this, that, and the other. You can't look at it like that, because it's just part and parcel of life. Nobody knows what's around the corner. And if Scott McTominay had gone to Napoli and scored 2 goals, nobody would have batted an eyelid. Nobody would have cared. So I don't think it is a problem. But in terms of the sell-on clauses that United have got a lot more savvy in doing in the last 12 months, they have improved in the sellers market in doing that. It's been a clever tactic of Manchester City for a number of years. So the fact they're now inserting sell-on clauses, particularly into the lesser players that they're selling, and another one is Maxi Oyedele, who went to Legia Warsaw last summer, really surprised, left field move. And he's had a really good first season in Poland. I think 25, 26 appearances, something like that, kicked on, now being linked with German clubs, teams in the Championship have expressed interest. And United have got a decent sell-on clause. I think 40%, I think it is. So I think with a release clause of €6 million, United stand to bank about £2 million if he's sold this summer by Legia. So, as you said, Sean, it's not, in Alanga's case, it's not groundbreaking money. It's not going to change things enormously for Manchester United, but every little helps. In a summer where they're having to box clever They haven't got financial income from the Champions League to come. They're going to need every penny they can possibly get. So Elanga, £5-6 million. It could potentially be £5 or £6 million towards a striker. It could be the difference in negotiations. You don't know. A lot of people will look at it and think it's not going to do a lot for a club of Manchester United's stature. Lower league clubs, absolutely, it'd be game changing for them. But for someone like Manchester United, it's not going to turn the dial enormously, but it will help at the very least. So I think United deserve credit for the way they've improved in that sense. And I would imagine there will be deals this summer where youngsters who are unlikely to make the grade will be sold permanently, and sell-on clauses again will be a feature of those outgoings. So it could be a trait we see a lot of in the next year or two. But in Elanga's case, that deal looks like it's going to happen to Newcastle. United are going to get a little bit of the money, and it will help them. But ultimately, it's not going to be a massive payday for them, but it will help nonetheless.
Definitely, and as you said there, they have got better at it, and there's the likes of Alvaro Carreras at Benfica who could have that sort of release clause as well. I've been linked with Real Madrid, and then there's Mate Kova who's been linked with PSV. I believe there's a sell-on clause there, so it will help United's cause. And as you say, there are players who they might sell this summer who will have the same sort of circumstances. And when United do need a box clever, that is a way of bringing in that extra income. So that probably feels like a natural place for us to end the conversation today. Thanks for joining us, George. Good to have you back on the podcast. Good to have you back on the desk this week. And thanks for you all joining us. We'll have all the latest on the transfer stuff on the Manchester Evening News website. You can catch it all there. All the latest on Mbeumo, all the latest on the 5 players leaving the club, all the latest on potential money they're going to bank from Antony Malacia, the striker search, so on and so forth as we build up towards that return to football next weekend when Man United take on Leeds United in a pre-season friendly in Stockholm. We'll have another podcast later this week, so join us again then. But for the meantime, thanks for joining us. Continue reading everything we put on the website, and we'll see you next time.